Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Thank you for taking your time and joining us to be a part of this panel, Black and White Black Experiences at PWIs. We've put together different questions for our panelists to provide them the opportunity to spotlight and amplify the different experiences and stories of our university's Black students, faculty, and staff. This panel is also hoping to contribute to the larger conversation that needs to be had about the challenges faced by Black people attending predominantly white institutions as well as working at them. For this panel, I want to thank our work group that put in a lot of work towards this. So Jared, Victoria, Talia, Shiloh, thank you all so much for contributing to this, as well as thank you to our panelists for being involved. So before we begin, I'd also like to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. So Dr. Taylor, if you would like to introduce yourself first, and then we can go Chevene, Nadira, and then Kendra.
Okay, hi everyone. I am Ashley Taylor. I am a professor of psychology here at Georgia College. My specialties in teaching are developmental psychology, and I also teach classes on the psychology of gender and research methods and statistics. Happy to be here.
Hi everybody, my name is Chevene. I work in university housing. Been doing that for about 4 years. I'm actually a native of Milledgeville, and twice an alumnus of Georgia College. I was a biology major, was a middle school teacher, did a lot of other things. Now I found myself back at Georgia College. So hopefully my experience can be welcomed and shared with you all for whatever questions you have. Thanks for having me.
Hello, everybody. First, I want to apologize for looking a little tired. I woke up at 4:30, up since 4:30 this morning. I just finished my clinicals at Macon. So I'm a little tired, but I'm here. I'm excited. I'm a nursing student at Georgia College. I'm a junior. I have a minor in Spanish. I'm also the president of Black Student Alliance, and I'm really excited to share my thoughts on Georgia College and being a Black student here.
Hey, I'm Kendra. I'm a senior at Georgia College. I'm also the vice president of Pride Alliance. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Okay, thank you all for introducing yourselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the panel. So before attending Georgia College, I've only offhandedly heard about it. My dad used to work around the area, so he used to drive through Milledgeville, and a friend of mine also told me about it because she got admitted here for fall of 2018. When I applied, I did kind of minimal research, but I did get the opportunity to also interview with an admissions counselor in my town. And the way that the demographics as well as the opportunities around what I'm interested in were presented to me, that's why I ended up attending. So since first impressions are super important to establishing a baseline feeling about something or someone, what were your first impressions of the university? We can start with Kendra and then go Nadira, Chevene, and then Dr. Taylor.
I heard about Georgia College through someone who went to my high school. And I didn't really mind where I went to college, so I just kind of applied to random places and I got in here, and it was the right amount of length from home. But once I drove through the area and I kind of started to see when I did a tour, I realized pretty quickly what the demographics were, and kind of what I'd be getting myself into if I did end up coming here.
Okay, so the way I heard about Georgia College was I really honestly never heard of the school until a girl was 2 years older than me. She actually came here to play soccer. So I was like, you know what, my senior year of high school, I was looking to go play somewhere. So I was like, no, I know someone that goes to Georgia College. So I can go. So I came down here for an ID camp where basically kind of play with the soccer team and kind of like you get scouted by the coach. So I played, actually came, that's one reason why I came here, one place I applied to, because I ended up, committing to the team. So I ended up coming to Georgia College. I got in. And honestly, I had a small tour before I came in with the coaches, and I didn't really see the whole campus. I really saw like the main, like Max and the nursing and the health science building, because where I was going to be at as a nursing major. So I didn't really have a full idea of how, how, I don't say undiverse, but how the demographics here at Georgia College is mainly at PWIs. So I wasn't really sure how that was until like the first couple of days of class. And I was like, oh, I'm the only one in here. I'm the only Black student in this class, which is a nursing major. It's a very predominantly white female major. So, when you in class, you've seen all the other people who don't look like you. So definitely, my first impression was definitely a little off-putting because I wasn't used to this kind of environment where, I came from a diverse area. So I wasn't really used to this environment. But my first impression was overall really good. I do enjoy it here. So it worked out.
I think it's my turn, right? My experience was, my first impression was that of kind of, I guess, a dichotomy, because Georgia College is a different world than Milledgeville. So I'm familiar with Milledgeville. So I grew up here, went to high school. I went to the Army after high school, and then coming back, Milledgeville was just home. So actually coming to Georgia College was, hey, let me figure out this whole new world. So it was different in some aspects, but the classroom situation was very similar, being, a great student in high school. And then, being one of very few African-American males in some of the pre-AP classes and stuff like that. So it's very similar, but definitely my first impression was, okay, most of the people here aren't from here. So it takes on an environment of kind of where most of the students were coming from. And I guess that was at that time, the Atlanta region. So it kind of felt like, okay, it didn't feel like, Milledgeville, it felt something else.
So as a faculty member, or interviewing as a faculty member, that was my first time setting foot at Georgia College. So I'm coming in, I drove in from Atlanta, and I'm from the South, so that part was not new or shocking to me. I've been educated and have attended predominantly white institutions my whole life. That part was not shocking to me. So my first overall impressions, I don't know, seemed pretty normal in terms of how academic settings can be or often are. I will say, given the topic of this panel, the thing that got me coming into Georgia College was where they had me staying. So faculty interviews are like 2-day affairs. So you have to stay somewhere overnight. And they're like, oh, you'll be staying at the Antebellum Inn. I said, what? The what? So that was the part, in terms of my first exposure to Georgia College, that kind of had me raise an eyebrow. And I definitely was thinking, okay, what is the climate going to be like on this campus? So that was my initial impression. Everything seemed generally kind of similar to the way it is on other predominantly white institutions, but I was concerned and thinking a lot about, was there a racial climate that I wasn't aware of, that was maybe not being shown during my interview, but that once I would live in Milledgeville, that I would find out about.
I definitely agree, because that was, as Chevene talked about, that was one thing I wasn't aware of, because being exposed to like student life on campus was one thing, but then once you like leave that space of Georgia College, the demographic is entirely different. The demographic makeup and university as well as the surrounding area, I was under the impression that they were the same, but that obviously like wasn't the case. So I know my mom, she was also concerned about like, oh, is this like the same environment that you're going to be in, like school and Milledgeville wise? But that definitely isn't the case. And that's still really interesting to like look at and see that like this university space is so predominantly white, but the outside area isn't. But another thing that I wanted to know was based on these first impressions that you had for the student panelists, like were you ever interested in attending another university? Nadira, if you would like to go first.
Sorry, I've been gone all day, so she's like super clingy right now. But I wasn't really interested in going to another college because, like I said, I had committed here to play soccer, so that was really the only thing. The only reason why I went to college, but the main reason why I came here and like I committed, I was like, well, if I'm coming here, I have the grades. I already got in. I know I'm going to get in. I have the grades. And like hear my coaches talk saying how I am a Black female, I have all A's in high school, I'm getting the Zell Miller scholarship, so it's like, of course, that looked good on admissions. So I didn't really have any second options when it came to Georgia College. And back to my first impression, like it definitely was different than my home environment, like, you know, having all white roommates or something like this, basically being surrounded by white people at a predominantly white institution was definitely different. But I mean, I don't really have a second choice. I mean, my second choice probably been UGA or Kennesaw, but those were other bigger schools that all my friends from high school went. I was trying to get away from, you know, my area in high school. I was trying to go somewhere different, be exposed to different things, different people, different values, stuff like that. So I'm glad I came here. So because I definitely enjoyed like the smaller atmosphere, having like only smaller classes, and like you feel more connected with your professors. And I feel like I would not have gone at a bigger school because, you know, our classes were never really bigger than 50 people. So, but then you hear UGA has like 300 plus people in class. So I'm definitely, I'm glad I chose this one. It was my first choice, my first and only choice, but it was good.
How about you, Kendra?
I definitely agree with a lot of what Nadira said. Like I was trying to kind of get kind of far away from like where a lot of people from where my high school were going, like kind of saw in UGA. And I thought about transferring schools a little bit, but like ultimately, like the friends I made and like the community that I found was kind of more important. And I kind of prioritized that over, you know, being a Black student at a PWI and like just having that be my experience. I kind of like weighed the odds and I thought that that was worth it.
For Chevene and Dr. Taylor, since you all both work here, like in like also spinning off of that, were you ever interested at like working or teaching at another institution? And but what ultimately like made you stay here? Dr. Taylor.
Okay, I was gonna let Chevene go first. I thought when I first started, I thought there's no way I'm staying here. I thought there is no way I'm staying in this little town. And because I'm not from Georgia, right? So I didn't have family here at the time. And I just thought, no, this is not really where I want to be. I just knew in my heart of hearts. Mind you, I've been here 8 years now. So obviously I stayed, but I just knew when I started, I wasn't going to stay, and that I should be working at an HBCU, right? Like that feels like the dream, you know, like, oh, I'll be a Black professor. I'll be like in there, you know, all my Black students. And, you know, ultimately what made me, I won't say it's what made me stay, but part of the reason I have stayed, just from a job satisfaction standpoint, I think I get what I need here. In terms of the race piece of it, it became increasingly important for me, or I started to recognize the importance of having Black faculty on staff. I think I had the experience as a student, at predominantly white institutions, being like, oh man, I'm the only one in here, but seeing that unicorn, like the one, like, super fly. I had this specific example of this like super fly Black female professor. I'm like, I want to be her. Like, who is that? Or being in a Black professor's office, like, man, I'm having a hard time, and getting that mentorship and empathy and understanding that I needed. And so part of the reason I have stayed, and I think what has contributed to my satisfaction of being at Georgia College, is because I think I'm that person for my students. I get a lot of behind closed doors conversations. I get a lot of, what class do you teach? When I'm in the hallway, or even just that nod of recognition that I think makes a difference. And that helps me feel good about what I'm doing here, even though sometimes, I might be the only one fighting that fight or being the support. And so that's a big part of why I have stayed teaching at Georgia College.
Chevene, if you would like to go.
Sure, I'll chime in. I think at first, me coming back to work at Georgia College was more of, hey, I needed a job that was comfortable. So in housing, it's, part of our perks is we work where we live. So we kind of have that built in. Housing, one less thing I had to worry about. I knew I wasn't going to stay here long, but I took the opportunity, in between those 4 years, COVID hit, right? And we're still going through that. So it was just a comfortable spot. But each year I have been trying to improve on my soft skills. So I knew one day that being able to work in conflict resolution and working well with people, and even though I'm not a psychologist, what does that look like? How could I encourage individuals to access the resources that are there? This motivational bit, working well, gaining somewhat of an expertise with a student base that doesn't look like me. And I knew that would be super marketable. And so we're kind of born with that anyway. I call it, biculturalism. We just do various things, at a great level. So I just knew those soft skills is something that I would need and that I was getting. It was an environment that was comfortable given COVID. But the writing's on the wall for me, and I'll eventually be moving on. But that's what has kept me here.
Thank you for sharing that. Because I know as a student here, as Dr. Taylor was talking about, like, at first I was unsure because I couldn't really find other students that looked like me. So that comfort level wasn't entirely there, but I've had Dr. Taylor as a professor, and that same experience you've had with your Black professor when you were in college, that's the same experience I ended up having, having you as a teacher. So seeing how somebody that looks like me can still thrive in such a predominantly white space kind of definitely contributed to me wanting to stay here and make a difference somehow. As we were talking about before with different experiences from high school as well as previous employers, I know for me, when I was in high school, I was fortunate enough to go somewhere that was rich in diversity, but I do realize, especially after my time being here, that I was in a very sheltered environment and I wasn't aware of the issues surrounding predominantly white institutions and how that has an impact physically and psychologically on underrepresented students. You both touched on it briefly beforehand, but focusing more on faculty and staff, Chevene and Dr. Taylor, what were those previous experiences and encounters in predominantly white spaces for you, or workspaces? Chevene, if you would like to go first this time.
Sure. They were and are exhausting at times, tiring, and kind of, it was an environment where I had to cower. So I've tried to put myself in a position to be in populations that are more marginalized than me, and realize what privilege I do have. But I realized that in a lot of spaces where I've worked, that's not a similar viewpoint held by my supervisors and colleagues. So with that being said, I just don't tell people everything I've done and where I've been and what languages I know and all this stuff. So part of that is just, I can't bring my whole self to work. And I realized that. And I realized that just my presence makes people a little uncomfortable. I remember sometimes I would dress up. I didn't call it dressing up, but I feel like I always have to wear a collared shirt or something to work. And so one day I was like, you know what, let me just put on some ties, throw stuff together, put on a jacket. And I had my supervisor come by and he was like, hey, you interviewing somewhere? You trying to take my job? I was like, no, I'm just dressing up. Oh, okay. So I did that a couple times, that year I worked at that job, and then that just really got underneath his skin enough to say something. So even in that was a little disconcerting, but okay. I felt like I just had to dumb it down and then just, try to fit in as well as I could. But and then sometimes I think I was fortunate to have people actually say something in response to where I dressed or what I said, right? A lot of the times we don't get that feedback, and that doesn't let us, then we're kind of clueless to how our colleagues and our supervisors think about us, that kind of thing. But that would be some of my experiences working at a PWI or an environment that was less diverse.
Thank you for sharing. That is very unfortunate that sometimes Black expression can't be taken as simply that, and it has to be added to it, as you were talking about. Just dressing up shouldn't be considered anything out of the ordinary, and other people should just take it as that. But fortunately, some spaces like that, that's how it is. But hopefully things will develop more and not be just that. Dr. Taylor, would you like to contribute to that as well?
Okay, sure. I think racial microaggressions feel the same, or in my experience, they feel the same as a student as they do as a professor, right? Like it happens and you're like, did he just, right? And you're like, is it me, right? And you start to question, it takes up too much mental space, right? Like, Toni Morrison says that the issue with racism is that it distracts you from your real work, right? Like I'm supposed to be in class focusing on this, but now I got to think about what just happened and whether it was because of my race. I think that happened to me as a student, but it also has happened to me as a faculty member, as a postdoctoral fellow, just sort of anywhere where racial microaggressions happen. The difference, I think, for me now in those experiences is I feel more empowered, right? Like I'm more privileged as being a professor. So I feel more empowered to address them. And not being worried about the consequences of me being able to address those things. So they still happen, right? Like I've had being a new professor, someone has walked into my classroom while I was teaching and said, "Where's the professor?" has walked into my office where it says Dr. Ashley Evans Taylor on the outside and assumed that I was the administrative assistant, right? Those things still happen. Whereas as a student, I felt like, oh, if I experience a microaggression from a teacher, like, what can I do about this? Now I'm the teacher, right? So I can say, excuse you, right? And kind of check it when it happens. But also, I will say that I think an important part of my role as, having more privilege as a professor is that I try to do that for my students as well, right? So we're in a university Senate meeting and a Black student representative says something and a faculty member is like, well, I don't believe that. I'm like, check, right? We didn't invite you here. We didn't invite this student here for you to discredit what they're saying. The student cannot say that, or maybe feels like they cannot say that. I will, right? And I do. So to your point, like, what are those experiences like? I think, unfortunately, they're real similar. I think they're really similar, but your experiences and your status, your privilege, your identities, like, will play a role in how you can deal with them. But it's always pretty sucky, I think. I think that was your question, Kyle. I don't know.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Thank you. And I appreciate that faculty and professors such as both of you like make sure to speak up about things like that, because I know sometimes for me, if I, as you said, like it's distracting a lot. I'm not too sure if like Kendra and Nadira feel the same way, but like sometimes when I'm in class, I'm like too hyper aware of the fact that I'm the only Black person in a classroom, and it stresses me out and it makes me question sort of like imposter syndrome. But I know that that's not the case and that I deserve to be in these same spaces like everyone else. But sometimes it like makes me question like what about things that I wish I knew before coming here, so I can like, I feel like better cope with it in a way. Because for example, when I first came to the university, like, as I said before, I wasn't super well informed about the demographics or opportunities presented here. And my first like core memory of college freshman year was on West Campus. I was on the shuttle coming to class, and I just remember I was sitting there and I looked at everyone around me and like immediately felt panic. And I was like, okay, I'm the only Black person on this bus. I don't know how to react to that. For Kendra and Nadira, like in addition, like how I felt at that time are there anything that you wish that you knew before coming here? And like, has there also been any outlets presented to you that you wish you knew more about? Like, for example, were certain spaces like available to you in order to better deal with certain things? Sorry, that was a lot. Nadira, if you want to go first.
So I was I'm not gonna lie and sugarcoat it. I was miserable. My first semester here, I was calling my mom. I was going home every other weekend. I was like just 2 hours away. I was going home every other weekend. I didn't have a lot of friends here. All my friends were back home. So I was definitely, I was a little miserable. But I kind of things turned around like in October. I think the Cultural Center had like a cookout or something. Like November, October, I actually met the Black people on campus. I was like, where have y'all been at? I have not seen y'all this whole semester. I was like, but then being in the nursing classes, you kind of are sheltered in like same group of people you follow, the same kind of classes and all. Like I said before, nursing classes are usually predominantly white females. So that's what I was used to seeing in my classes. So for me, being able to go to the cultural center for that event and actually getting to talk to Nadira Mayweather and getting to talk to other people in the hub was really eye-opening. Actually made me want to stay and not be as miserable. Actually started coming out of my room a little bit more and started doing more activities. But I would kind of with my freshman year, the Black Student Alliance wasn't up and running until the spring. So I think over the summer, I didn't really hear a lot about the Black Student Alliance. But once I heard that I was starting back up in the spring, I was like, you know what? That's a way for me to get more involved with the Black students on campus and actually put myself out there for everyone. That's when I ended up running for vice president my freshman year, and now I'm president. So I'm glad like I actually got to stick with it and actually I'm glad that outlet was there for me. Like the hub is definitely a safe space for me and my friends. Like we go there often. I take naps there all the time. So I do appreciate the hub and the culture center in general. That really helped me get out of my comfort zone, coming from a very diverse place in around Atlanta to a predominantly white institution. It was very shell shocking for me because I wasn't used to literally being used to around that many white people. To put, not to be like super rude or anything, but that's really how it felt to me. It was like, I don't know how to be myself. I don't know how to act, because I never had to change myself. I'm just used to people being a lot more accepting and things like that. And I wasn't used to like teachers turning their neck or students breaking their necks, look at me during like conversation about racial stuff, which has happened a lot of times in the last 3 years. But I was really thankful that I had a group of people that went through similar experiences like I did in my freshman year. So I really do enjoy the Hub and Culture Center being my safe space.
Thank you. I 200% agree. The Cultural Center, Women's Center, and LGBTQ plus programs provided a space where like I could be comfortable and like have people who also looked like me and like shared the same like ways of thinking. So that is something that I'm appreciative to as well. Kendra, if you would like to contribute as well.
Yeah, I also agree. I love the cultural center and the hub and everything in it, like just being able to go there. And like you said, like knowing that the people I'm gonna talk to there like hold the same values as me, like really makes it easier to like make friends and everything. And I like shared a similar experience. Like I lived in the smallest dorm freshman year, so like when we had board meetings, it was like the entire dorm. And I remember walking in on the first day and we had the first dorm meeting, and I was the only person of color in the room, and I was like, yeah, this isn't gonna work. Like there has to like be a space where I can go. So I started going to the hub, and it felt like a little space away from like being in a PWI and like being with people who accepted me, and I didn't have to worry about like that boundary there.
Thank you. I feel like everybody who enters the hub like knows that they have a space that is for them and that they're allowed to be themselves in. And I really wish that it's like it would be promoted more, because I really think that more people need to like hear about it and be in that space to understand like how students like myself and you all also feel. So yeah, I think either Nadira or Kendra also touched on this, but like being overwhelmed while walking through campus or like in a classroom, I feel like we've all like felt that way. Have there been moments during your time on campus that you felt like isolated or even like felt like othered as well? Chevene, if you would like to go first.
That's a good question. I think the years of experience I have on this campus, I can't speak directly to it because I've learned to be okay with the isolation, if that makes sense. And I've even learned to calm other people's storms. And if you ever see me now and see me specifically at West Campus where I work, I always have my keys on me. And so I quickly realized that me walking around doing my job, students would clutch their book bag or just like, who's this tall black guy, right? So I think one of my greatest strengths is one of my greatest surprises. And so, a bunch of keys is, rattling. So you hear me before you see me. So hopefully there's no surprise because I'm walking around all times of night. If, things happen, if I could be present, I'm there. So I'm still not okay. I realize where I am. So I'm always aware but it's not trying to fit in and be okay with it. It's just realizing that, hey, if I can set the example for other students and other people that are coming to campus that look like me, then that's a good thing. All right. Because, most of the African-American males you see, okay, they play sports or they don't go to school here. But so me walking around, and a lot of times I like to walk around without Georgia College paraphernalia. And then just say this, I'm speaking, I'm mannerable. I think that goes a long way for everyone else who then follows in my footsteps. So hopefully I answered it.
You definitely did. Once again, it's really frustrating to hear that like experiences have to be like getting used to. So like this experience of isolation or being othered on campus, like you have to get used to it. Like it really upsets me, and I really hope that there can be other opportunities for people on campus to like not feel that way, because Black students really don't deserve to feel that way at all. Kendra, would you like to speak on this?
Yeah, I definitely feel kind of like isolated a lot on campus. Like as someone who doesn't dress like really straight passing very often, I feel like when I'm walking through campus, if people aren't noticing that I'm not white, they're noticing, that like one thing or the other. So it really makes me aware of like my presence on campus, and it makes it hard to, walk through class, and it still makes me like really anxious sometimes. Um, and like being in class, like I'm like super aware that I'm usually the only Black person, especially being a political science major and a criminal justice minor. Like those classes like usually aren't filled with a lot of, people who share the same values as me, and aren't white. So it's a little isolating.
I totally agree. Those experiences speak to my years here already. Dr. Taylor, if you'd like to speak.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna share my perspective on, the feelings of isolation and sort of being marginalized, because I do think they happen for us. We're talking specifically about Georgia College. Like, yeah, we as in Black folks, people of color, right, are in the minority, and that is isolating. I think also, as I said before, that experience will happen for you elsewhere, right? More than likely. Like there maybe are some like meccas, right? In the sense that there are places you can go and not feel isolated or different because of, race, but it might be something else, right? That makes you feel isolated and different. And so I hesitate to say like, oh, you just have to get used to it, because I don't think that's the case. But my perspective is that I very much try to identify what I'm here for, right? Like I am not at Georgia College that's not where I get fed, right? Like this is not necessarily like Georgia College is not like my family, like my friends, my people. I'm here for a specific reason, right? And it feeds that part of my my goals for myself, right? I love to be an educator. I think it's important for me specifically with all these identities to be in the classroom and to be teaching students that look like me and students that don't look like me, but I'm not here necessarily for affirmation of those things. And it took me a while to get to that point, to sort of, I don't know, dissociate what my life goals are, what brings me happiness from my job. And I think, that experience of isolation and marginalization, it never feels good, but it may be more tolerable if you are getting fed, right, in other places, if you can find your tribe of people outside of that. And Georgia College might not be that for you, right? Maybe there's a subset of people that can do that for you, but you may have to look for it elsewhere. So I no longer feel, as a grown up, I think it's different for college students because you live, work, play all in the same area. But like as a grown up, I don't look for all possible fulfillment from my job. Like it's nice if you can get, more than one thing on your list checked off at your job, but it is a job, it's not your life. And college may be similar in the sense that it will be temporary for most of you. Hopefully you graduate. You're not in college forever, right? But to, also think about what is it that you're here for. And some of it might be really, I don't want to sound cheesy in a sense, like, but it will be formative for you, right? To have these experiences, as challenging as they might be, you'll take them with you and build on them elsewhere. So I hope that for those of you that, are looking for your people and your tribe, right? And not having and having those experiences of isolation, that you're able to find a little piece of happiness somewhere, but don't look to Georgia College to give you that, you know. Also, my office is in the first floor of the psychology building. You know, it's COVID, so I don't let everybody in. But you know, if you need to make eye contact or just check in, I'll let you go.
Thank you. But I do agree with the fact that for college students, like that experience of needing, I guess, a space to feel seen and like celebrated in a way on campus, like we outside of it, it's not going to be super hard to look for, but like while we're here, I feel like that's something that we do definitely search for. But in addition to like these feelings that college students might face, like has there also, if you're comfortable with sharing, like been a time during your like presence on campus that there have been like positive experiences you've had, like where you've like felt comfortable or like felt seen in a certain type of way? Because I know earlier, Nadira, you talked about like you were able to find people in the hub that like you became friends with, like certain events or discussions that's been had, like have there been any positive experiences for you? Nadira, if you want to go.
I didn't get to answer the last question, but I kind of wanted to, so I'm going to go back to the isolation question. I like talking. So like Chevene said, like I kind of gotten used to being isolated or being the only one. Like I played soccer growing up and playing travel soccer. It's an expensive sport, and you know, being from around Atlanta, and you don't see many Black people on the top, and Black girls on the top team. So unfortunately, I had to get used to that at a young age. I started playing travel soccer at 12, and you know, like I said, but that's when we start getting more predominantly white women on the team. So I had, unfortunately, get used to that. I've gotten backhanded compliments and microaggressions from grown women starting at a young age. You know, so it's definitely a formative experience of feeling like the other person, feeling like, you know, totally different, that they single you out. Like my parents had multiple times, you know, the only Black parents on the sidelines, and you know, someone comes up to them, is that your daughter on the field? Well, obviously, because I'm the only Black girl on the field on this team, unfortunately. So it's like little microaggression comments. So isolation on campus wasn't like, even though it was miserable, it didn't take too long for me to find my little tribe, like Dr. Taylor said, to find my group of people. And I really do appreciate them, because they definitely made Georgia College a lot better experience for me, and like made it easier for me to be here. So moment, back to the current question, moment like I felt like appreciated in my GC2Y class. I can't remember the name of it, but we had to do a presentation on like, you know, different things. And like I like a lot of medical stuff. I'm a nurse. I want to be a nurse. I like the kind of like medical side of history. So I looked up did a research project on how slave women were basically the start of gynecology. And that was definitely, and it was interesting for me to learn like a lot of history that I didn't know. It was good for me to actually teach other white students in my class the importance of, like, you know, no one ever knew that, like anyone in my class knew. And especially in a lot of different medical history too, like enslaved Black women were the backbone of medical history, especially gynecology. Like they didn't have any choice in how they were used, and basically the doctor like bought them with intention to experiment on them and figure out a problem. So I was definitely like, after that, I was a little emotional too. I was like, wow, this is actually something like, you know, I'm like grateful that these people went through these experiences for us to get to where we are now in 2021. Like these things would have happened without the enslaved people back in the 1800s and 1700s. So that was definitely a moment like I felt appreciated and I felt seen, because I actually felt like I got to change people's like perspective on something that's so big in our lives. So that was definitely good.
Thank you for sharing. I'm glad that you got that opportunity in a class in order to like present to other students, because I know sometimes like information like that isn't actively sought after, especially in a space where most students already feel comfortable because they're surrounded by other people that look like them and make up the majority. Kendra, if you have an experience like that and you would like to share.
I don't really have like a singular specific one, but I think events like these and programs like these, you know, celebrating Black History Month, like campus wide, and doing that, like even not during Black History Month especially, is really important. But like seeing things like this, like, and white people like trying to educate themselves and not using Black students as their primary resource in education is really nice. And I think that's one of the main ways that I personally have like seen like race be celebrated.
Dr. Taylor or Chevene, if you have anything that you would like to contribute to that. Chevene, if you would like to go.
Sure. I'm sorry. Remind me, questions, last topic.
Like, since the last question was talking about any like isolating feelings or feelings of being othered, I also want to hear about like positive experiences you've had on campus, or like moments where you felt like seen as a Black person on a predominantly white campus.
Oh yeah, there are lots of them. But I think unfortunately they're all relationship based. So after having spent time with me or listening to me, oh, okay, that's Chevene, or that's that person. Oh my gosh, yeah, I saw you over there. Very few of them were, okay, spur of the moment, just giving the benefit of the doubt. And I understand that that's kind of how it is, but there are too many to name, right? You know, I have so much history, and even other people, you know, listening in on this panel. There was a time that, you know, that the hub didn't exist. And I remember that time, and coming through the years, and a lot of people currently at the hub have been instrumental in hearing people, the voice of people that look like me, and then others, to create a safe space for students, staff, and faculty. So I think that I have been seen, but a lot of the times it's just relational. You know, once they figure out who I am and positivity I have and the things I have to offer. So I think it's all my experiences are nestled kind of in that relationship bit.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Taylor, if you have anything also, you can contribute as well.
I'll be brief on this one. I think also my experiences of being seen have been attached to relationships, specific relationships. Sometimes those relationships, it's just that recognition, right? Like we're in a meeting together and like, you know, the look or somebody just waving and knows you, can, you know, acknowledging you. And sometimes it, unfortunately, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. The neighbor kids are coming over. So sometimes what that looks like is, unfortunately, it's like on the heels of a bad situation, right? Something that I wish had not happened, but then my people, right, rally around me, and then I feel really seen at, you know, in that moment. Like they're like, Ash, I know what you're going through, and you're not by yourself. Those are maybe the best. I said I was going to be brief, but I wasn't.
That's totally okay, but I do agree. Like sometimes finding that solidarity in spaces is good, because I know, for example, Nadira touched on it briefly, like sometimes in classes or just like in certain spaces, you feel so put on the spot, because there's been like multiple times during class discussions where we'd be talking about discrimination or racism, oppression, and like it's the ideas that the professors are trying to get across isn't working. So then they'll turn to me or like the other Black person in class to like, we still have to, instead of them actively looking for information to educate themselves, they want like the Black person or the other POC in the classroom to like teach it to them for them, so they don't have to do it themselves. Because I don't know, there's been like little microaggressions and like discriminatory instances like that have happened quite often. If you all are like, does anybody else have any experiences like that where like it feels like those instances of kind of microaggression and discrimination like have you been faced with anything like that on campus?
I'll
Yeah.
say yes to that, yes. And to give some insight on the professor side, professors don't know what they're talking about. You know, well, that's not entirely true. Let me clarify that. Most professors are not explicitly taught how to teach, right? So you might be an expert in your content area, but like, how do you convey that information in a way that is, you know, sensitive, appropriate, right? They don't know, right? Especially when it comes to things like race, sexual orientation, like gender. So if you think about your peers and the cringy moments you have with your peers, right, of experiencing those microaggressions, you would expect more from your professors, but they are about at the same level, right, as anybody else without that kind of like explicit instruction. So unfortunately, more often than not, those types of experiences will creep into the teaching, and it exacerbates it though, because of the power dynamic, right, in the room. The professors are supposed to not do that. Right. So I'm sorry, but I just want to explain that, yeah, it happens more than it should.
Yeah, it does definitely happen, and it's a little frustrating. Hopefully, like things like that could change more, but since we're coming close to time, for this question, I do want to hear from one more panelist, and then we can start to kind of wrap things up. So Kendra, would you like to speak on like any experiences of that you've had at all?
Yeah, like being, like I said, usually the only person of color in the room. Usually when race like comes up, especially if I don't want to talk, it feels like kind of like all eyes are on me. Like waiting for me to speak or waiting for me to like, you know, like disagree with someone, or like always being the one that has to like fight for like what, you know, is correct, that like, you know, like whoever is saying whatever, like expecting me to argue with them in class. And it's frustrating because like it kind of distracts from being a student. Like it kind of puts like my race on the forefront, like, oh, I have to constantly be aware of like, am I going to get called on for this question because like the professor doesn't know what to say, or like I have to be the one to educate white students and like a white professor, instead of just being a student in the class, like just there to learn like everybody else. So
I do agree. Those moments are very exhausting and so much pressure shouldn't be applied to like students on their own. So hopefully, like as we talked about earlier, like experiences or like events like this can like shine more light on that, and hopefully things can start to change a little. So coming to a close, there's a lot of things that I wish for people like who came to this panel and also participated in it to make it, my apologies. There are many things that I wish people in attendance of this panel, I wish that they're able to take what we've talked about and use it as a learning outlet for them. The stories and information that we share in the space is critical and better at bringing awareness to the voices of these experiences that happen on a daily basis. So if anyone is comfortable with sharing, either panelists as well as audience members, what are things that you wish for PWIs to do in the coming future to enhance their diversity and inclusivity? For audience members, I'm not too sure how knowledgeable you are, but if you can write stack in the chat and we can like go through if anybody's comfortable with sharing. But panelists, if students want to go first, or faculty staff would like to share about what they wish for in the future. Nadira.
For me, I personally like it when I feel like I'm being listened to and that my experiences matter. Like what really changed my perspective on like this campus actually recently was during the MLK commemoration on front campus this past 2 weeks ago. I was able to speak, and actually someone came up to me a white woman and white man came up to me after and was like, talk to me, so you spoke really well, like what makes you so passionate about it? And like I would have the opportunity to tell them like my personal experience and the fact that I feel like a lot of people don't realize how close segregation and racism was to us. Like my grandmother, my dad's parents, they're from right outside Athens, Georgia, so a really small country town, and they were born in the late 30s, early 40s, so they experienced racism in middle of Georgia. And the fact I was able to tell my grandma story she told me when I was a kid, that fact that she was hit in the head with a brick just for playing on a baseball field with her friends as a young Black child, that was really like, was me able to share that experience with someone else and see how like I really personally saw like her expression change in her face. I couldn't see like probably click something for her that, you know, that is not that far away. Racism and segregation is still a thing today. Systemic racism is still a big thing. See, the prison systems can go on and on about that, but that's not the point of this. But it is still like a big thing. I really do like, I feel like people need to listen to us when we talk, when we say, well, like this thing is true. We're not saying because it just happens to us, it happens to every Black person around the United States and around the world. Not as we face discrimination everywhere, unfortunately, because of the color of our skin, because we're darker than a lot of people. So first, for me personally, I feel like just being able to be a listening ear and to actually take our experiences and do better, like do better in the future, do better than y'all's grandparents, than y'all's great grandparents, because unfortunately we all are coming from other people. Like I have a slave last name. I'm going to admit, there's a Colbert, Georgia, that was a slaveholder place in Georgia. So it is very emotional and it's very moving, but it's the fact that I'm able to share experiences and to actually willing people who want to listen and want to learn from the experiences mean a lot to me. So let's be open ear and be a receptive listener.
Your dog agreed. Chevene, if you would like to talk on this as well.
Sure. I was just thinking as I was sitting here, I would love to give a quick answer to someone who posted something in the chat. I would say just ask questions. A lot of the times, question is a question, but I think the danger comes in just the assuming. Well, I know how they are. Just asking a question. Sometimes, hey, there is a yes and a no, so you may not get the answer you want, but at least you tried as you're asking the question. Another thing could be, there's power in a name, right? So, asking where a name came from and pronouncing it right, it's very important. Like I said, it's something that may be overlooked. Oh yeah, sorry. We get called other people's names all the time. So you getting our name right, oh man, it speaks volume. It just validates, hey, you're a person here, you have a name, and I said it correctly. Oh wow. But I would love to see the conversation move away from being an interview question and moving more into actions. So for instance, and I brought this up the last couple of years, even to my department and other places, it's becoming more and more popular when you interview either as a student or faculty staff member, the DEI question, diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's a selling point now. So getting experience in this is just as valuable as Microsoft Excel. But the difference is the individuals in those communities have names. They're just not, hey, you need to go over there, spend time with them, have some friends of color or of culture, and then boom, be able to talk about it. So I think if it moves further away from just a set of questions and experiences you need to have for this job, to actually relationships you have had. So that's kind of my spiel on that.
Thank you a lot. Dr. Taylor.
I think your original question was like, what is the wish? What wish we have for sort of changing the culture?
Yes, that's about right. Like what hopes do you have in the future for more diversity and inclusivity in PWIs?
I think from a very tangible standpoint, I hope this doesn't sound overly simplistic, but I think universities, university systems need to put their money where their mouth is, because there is a lot of discussion, as Chevene was suggesting, like the question is on the application and there's a diversity action plan, but the resources are not there to recruit, retain, recruit and retain talented faculty, staff, and students. And the universities that do that best don't just talk about it, they take action. And that requires funds. It requires money. And from my perspective, my limited perspective, the people who are doing that, diversity work are often working with the lowest budgets to try to get things done, right? And it's really not fair. And it's no wonder that places like Georgia College don't have the diversity, equity, and inclusion that we aspire to, because we quite honestly probably don't have what we need in terms of tangible resources in order to do that, to make us competitive at recruiting top talent that has diverse backgrounds.
I do agree. I know that throughout my time here, one big thing that's been pushed but hasn't been seen through is making sure that spaces are more inclusive and having a more diverse entrance rate. But as you said, there's a lot of moving parts to that, and it has to start kind of with the systems and then trickle down sort of. Kendra, if you have any final thoughts too.
Yeah, so I think specifically for Georgia College, I would hope that the university just kind of pours more funds into diversity and inclusion as a whole. And we kind of touched on how Milledgeville and Georgia College, those are two very different communities, and how Milledgeville is not a predominantly white community. So pouring into those communities and kind of bringing those people in, even if they aren't students at Georgia College, at the very least seeing them on campus, I think is really important. And also pouring into places like the Hub and the Culture Center, which I know we already talked about, but I think the amount of people who've spoken on how great that community is there, and the programs available to them speaks on how important things like that are, and how they should be highlighted and amplified, and all efforts should be made for people to come to that and experience that.
Thank you. But I definitely agree with that. Having spaces like the Hub present on campuses such as this one that is predominantly white and doesn't really give a lot of opportunities for Black students as well as other students of color to find community and build it. Making sure to highlight those spaces more often is definitely one thing I really wish for in the future, for Georgia College as well as other PWIs. I feel like that will help a lot with just building a stronger message of we're inclusive and we are diverse, but also making sure that spaces are accommodating for students like us, so, and also faculty and staff. So yeah, thank you to all the panelists who've attended. I loved hearing everything that you've had to talk about and also contribute to this very important conversation. And yes, so the panel has come to a close. So yeah, thank you all so much for attending and being a part of this. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I was president of BSA. If anyone has any questions or on any opportunities you want to work with BSA on, email me. Can't promise a quick prompt response because nursing school, but I promise I'm trying to work balance both of it. But I do appreciate the panel and being able to come and sit and talk with y'all today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.